Welcome back, live from Northeast Iowa. I'm Mark Dorenkamp for Brownfield. This is the NewLeaf Symbiotics Virtual Field Day, and we've been talking throughout the morning about this ag tech company. Started 7 years ago. They have biological products for crops, including corn, and a product for rootworm that they are developing for release potentially in 2023. And right now we're going to welcome in our representatives from IN10T. And IN10T has been working with NewLeaf this summer, and we have with us Jeff Travers and Jay Pershing. Jeff, let's begin by talking a little bit about how IN10T got involved, and then after that, kind of your background and what brought you to IN10T.
Sure. Well, Randy Barker, CEO of IN10T, approached me in the fall of 2018, and he wanted to know if I was interested in coming aboard because IN10T at the time needed some help with smaller plot work, contract research organizations. And I didn't know anything about IN10T, so we had a nice breakfast meeting, and he described the niche, the role that IN10T plays with farmers. And I was pretty excited because having been in industry for 33 years and at Monsanto we had everything we needed from A to Z to get everything done from discovery to commercialization. But he described a situation with a lot of startup companies and companies that are not really in the pesticide space. They're in the ag space, such as microbials and stimulants and whatnot. And he mentioned that there's a great need for the kind of work he did, the kind of work IN10T did. So it was very intriguing, and I was sold. And so I started about 2 years ago in the spring. And again, my role for him that I play with IN10T is more on small plot contract research programs, but this program morphed into something that got my involvement for NewLeaf Symbiotics.
One of your responsibilities here on this tour has been to wash off the roots of the corn, and you were saying that that's not something you had ever experienced before, but let's talk about those 33 years at Monsanto and what you did.
Well, thank you. I basically spent my life in research and development for herbicides. And I would say out of those 33 years, I was actively involved in field research for 31 years. So I've always been in the field, and the projects I enjoyed the most were those that involved field work and interaction with farmers, growers, and our tech development reps or our product development reps, much like this. So IN10T for me has allowed me to continue to stay in a field that I really enjoy. And a day like this is wonderful, but this last week has been a little gruesome at times. But things have been pretty good. And in my tenure with Monsanto, I probably helped launch or directly launched about 15 different herbicide products. And again, I retired in 16 and joined up with IN10T in 2018.
You mentioned it's been grueling. I'm sure you've had some fun, had some laughs, but
Sure.
Probably pretty exhausted when you hit the pillow.
Yeah, falling asleep is not a problem. The good news is that we typically, with a big crowd, IN10T, Jay and I are there. We have a regional agronomist. We have the grower. I was really impressed with how the growers, for most part, wanted to be active in what we were doing. They wanted to see what we did. A couple actually helped us dig, which was really nice. And then, of course, we've had the NewLeaf crew that's been with us. So it's been a lot more fun, and I'd say it's a lot less work than I thought it was going to be originally. So it's been a hoot.
Before we ask Jay about his experience working with you, what has your experience working with Jay been like?
He's a blast. He and I overlapped at Mizzou, but we didn't know each other. We only worked together at Monsanto for a couple of weeks. When we learned, as this program morphed into what it is, originally we didn't think we were going to be on the road doing this. So I recruited Jay, by the way, to come on and join IN10T when Randy said that we had a rootworm project going. And not knowing them all that well, it's been fun. And on our trip, we've driven 3,000 miles, Jay?
At least.
This is day 11. If he had a wig, I don't know. Anyway, it's day 11 now, and I drive the whole time. I don't let him drive. I heard somebody told me before that he's not a good driver, so I drive, he navigates.
Well, and you're about to make it loud out here. You're going to fire up the power washer?
Well, I think before I do that, Jay has a lot to explain about how we do our work.
See, I was going to explain to our listeners why you were about to just exit the camera, and I had this whole transition planned, and
I will
you
let-
stick to cleaning off the roots, all right, Jeff? Thank you very much. But Jay, come on in here. How good of a driver is Jeff?
Jeff's good. He's aggressive. I'm not a bad driver. I'm a slow driver. Jeff's very aggressive. If I sleep, I keep one eye open.
Well, you were recruited out of retirement by Jeff, and when he heard Rootworm, apparently the light bulb went off that you were the guy. What's your backstory?
Well, you know, I worked at Monsanto for 30 years. 24 years of that included rootworm. Okay, so that was from the discovery of the insecticidal proteins, putting the genes in plant and taking it all the way to launch. You know, working with our commercial folks. My initial role was discovery, protein insecticidal discovery, and when we were able to get corn transformation working, then we had the technology for corn borer. That was BT. And so that's when I transitioned from discovery to now development. And I provided the entomological support. So I was the entomologist on the team and was, though, taken through all the way to commercial as the entomologist. So when our rootworm came along, you know, the protein, the gene, they asked me if I would lead that from the experience I had with European corn borer. So that allowed me to really direct the planning and co-lead on the launch team. And so that's the backstory there. Now, when Jeff called me, you know, my retirement goal wasn't to work, but he said rootworm, and he also said it's only going to be about 6 hours. Okay, you know, we just need a design, Jay, and I said, you betcha. And it's turned into this, and this has been absolutely great working with the NewLeaf people and the Intent people. I'm a consultant for Intent.
And I don't want to get too far off track here, but in listening to Jeff talk about you, I mean, you were really at the forefront as far as this BT development to fight against corn rootworm pressure. I mean, you were there at the start.
Yeah. So, you know, as an entomologist coming out of grad school, what I didn't want to do, nothing wrong with it, but I personally didn't want to work in the discovery and development of chemical insecticides because they've been doing that since the 1940s. So it's all, you know, that process has been developed. When I listened to the chief scientific officer of Monsanto at a symposium talk about Monsanto's vision, it was like the light bulb went off, you know, as an entomologist to help in that discovery and then figure out how we develop products from the entomology perspective. And so that's what really got me excited to join Monsanto. You know, so here we are.
Jeff's background in herbicide and yours in rootworm mitigation. And I say mitigation now, but for a long time, I mean, the BT traits were very effective, but resistance, whether it's on the weed side with herbicides like Jeff or now the rootworm pressure that you're seeing, they've developed a resistance.
Right, and the corn borer pressure. But rootworm's absolutely an amazing critter in terms of developing resistance. So the first insecticides were developed in the 1940s. They were the cyclodienes like chloridane, heptachlor, and things like that. By mid-1960, they were fully resistant, so they were ineffective. The second generation, the organophosphates, the carbamates, and the pyrethroids, there are documented cases of resistance. And then we launched the corn borer trait in 1997, so that's 27 years on the market, 23 years on the market. And the rootworm trait in Monsanto was the first at that, but there's been 3 additional from Dow, Pioneer, and Syngenta. We launched that in 2003. So here we are now at 2020, and we're seeing resistance there. So obviously a pipeline and tools, more tools in the toolbox are necessary. You know, I've been retired and out of rootworm now for really about 10 years, because my last 4 years at Monsanto were focused on diseases and a few other things. But on this trip, talking to farmers and why they were really interested in doing this, not only do they want to be in the trialing business, but they wanted to see, they feel, you know, that's what the consumer is looking for, a biological. as an alternative to what's out there today, and they want to be handling it. They want to be as early as possible, and Intent has made that possible for NewLeaf.
And I think it's important for our viewers to hear about your background and about Jeff's background, because it really validates who's doing the research, and it I think in a way validates biologicals, because there has been a thinking out there that, you know, for whatever reason, the farmers have just been skeptical, and clearly you two are on board with this.
Yeah, I would like to hope that the credibility that we can lend to the design and how we sample and how we evaluate will help the industry and the NewLeaf themselves in terms of product concept, product positioning, go-to-market strategy, but also the farmer knowing we just had 9 this time. We're going to hopefully expand it quite a bit next year. Believe the data.
Well, Jay, you said Jeff drives fast, you drive slow, but when it comes to digging for corn rootworm, you probably have to stay at the same speed. So as we kind of take our viewers through the process that you two follow, where do we begin?
Okay, well, let me think about that. So we're standing in front of the this trial here, okay? And there are 5 treatments. There's 16 row. That's based on the farmer's planter. 16 rows per treatment. So we got the 2 NewLeaf products, 201, which is the corn rootworm, 801, which is the corn rootworm with the biostimulant. And really the goal is to compare the performance of those 2 treatments against the untreated check. So no corn rootworm management on it. And that gives us an idea of the corn rootworm pressure, okay, that we're experiencing in this spot within the field. And then to 2 commercial standards, the insecticide and a traded corn, okay? And so that's the first thing. And then I wanted to talk about what we measure and how we do it, okay? But what I also, can I start there?
Well, I just thought I'd jump in quickly too and tell our viewers again where we're at. We're in northeast Iowa, Chickasaw County, just outside of New Hampton, and this is a field that's been corn on corn for what, 16 years? I thought I heard.
Between 12 and 15. The farmer, said between 12 and 15. So this is high risk corn rootworm, okay? And so this particular location was not one of the locations that we really got data from. So we come in and evaluate the untreated check. If there is no or very minimal damage from rootworm, there's no point in rating the rest. So we're done with this trial, okay? Now what's interesting is this farm is about a 1,200 acre farm, okay? And all the corn is corn on corn, again, high risk. And the farmer actually manages his corn rootworm with traits, okay? And he was surprised. Why isn't it corn rootworm here? I've got corn rootworm all over this farm, and in fact, even in this field, we have corn rootworm. But it just so happens right where our spot is. So the question is, why is that? Now we were the last planted, and a bit late by a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks over the field, and that had to do with the delay getting USDA approval to release and state approvals to plant. So that's why it was delayed. When you think about corn rootworm, when they hatch in the spring, there needs to be corn there. We may have, the majority of hatch may have already occurred by the time this was planted, and might explain why in a field that has fairly decent rootworm pressure, we don't have any in this spot. So that was a bummer, but that's the way it is, and that's the complexity.
So getting back to the validation, the background that you have and that Jeff has, but then also the process that you follow, that you adhere to when you go into the field. Walk us through that.
Okay, so there are 2 metrics that we evaluate. One is root feeding damage, and we use the Iowa State Node Injury Scale, and I'm going to refer to that as root damage rating, and I'm going to say RDR from here on out, okay? It's a lot easier. And the other is lodging. Okay, so root damage rating is basically used by industry and academia to be able to make advancement decisions to really compare how that product is performing. Growers don't use that. Growers don't go out into the field. And I talked to the growers on this trip to be sure that's still the case, What they do is performance is based on lodging. If the corn is standing, the product is performing. okay? But lodging is hit or miss too. There's a lot of factors that go into lodging: soil moisture, major wind events that may not have anything to do with rootworm, but we know that root feeding damage, or RDRs, correlate very well with the risk of lodging, okay? And so that's what we use there. And so what I wanted to do, if I is talk about how we did it, how we captured root damage and lodging, okay? So so we did all our data from the middle 2 rows. So this is a 16-row plot, so we did it on 8 and 9. We go in about 20 feet. We go in 20 feet to get away from the edge effect, and we do lodging first. And this is not rocket science, okay? But it's a good methodology, and it's really the amount of distance. So these are about 220-foot strips, and I said 16 rows in this case. They vary depending on the farmer's planter. And we'll measure 100 feet. We'll count standing plants and lodging plants and calculate a percentage. Very simple, okay? But again, lodging is how the farmer perceives performance. But we need really the critical data to us to understand how it's performing is root damage rating. And again, like I said, we use the Iowa State Node Injury Scale. It's a 0 to 1. Jeff will be washing some roots, and then I'm going to show a little bit of rating. But you know, there's bias can come in terms of plant selection. And when you think about the rootworm biology and oviposition behavior, that's laying eggs in the soil, it's very aggregated. So we got to account for that. So we are taking, we go in again, like I said, 20 feet, and we're taking 10 plants per row in a zigzag pattern. So I'll start off, take 1, Jeff goes 10 feet up. So we cover 200 feet within that strip. And we'll have 20 plants for that treatment. So for the entire trial here, there's 100 plants to dig, wash, and rate, okay? And so what we do is, I've already dug the plant. Jeff and I will go in and identify the plants, okay? And the way we select the plant without any bias, we step off the 10 feet where our toe lands on the left foot. That plant gets it, whether it's a good plant or a bad looking plant, okay? No real selection on our part. It's and so we'll get 20 plants. Jeff and I go in, strip the leaves, put the tag on. We use a Tyvek tag with a wire twisty, because these plants are going to get banged up a little bit, you know, and they're going to go through a high pressure sprayer. Clip it off, and our NewLeaf team here behind us are digging, okay? And you bring it out, and like you could say, there's quite a bit of dirt on there. And so after, what I call it is, you know, label, lop, and then shake. And shaking is just knocking the dirt off to give Jeff a little bit of ease on his washing, okay? And then we just toss it, bring it out to the front and toss it into the tub. And we'll have 2 tubs, you know, and a big pile here. And Jeff will get, once the roots start coming in here, Jeff is going to, with some help, are going to start washing. Me and my recorder, we sit in lawn chairs, and I do the rating, and the recorder writes it down, okay? And again, they're coded, so we don't know what treatment's what until we analyze the data.
Well, as we have Jeff go to turn on the power washer, with the 2 tubs, Jay, typically how many plants have you tossed into those tubs?
So you know, it's 20 plants per treatment, 5 treatments per location, so it's 100. I mean, it's not a ton, but you got to remember, it's 95 degrees, at least 100% humidity in the cornfield with a lot of pollen. So, yeah.
I guess we have to let the one that you just tossed in soak for 5 minutes, you said, right?
Oh, how long to soak? No, that's just, yeah, this power washer works really great, okay? So Jeff's gonna demonstrate how that's done as she turns that camera on.
Yep. So we're gonna continue to kind of describe what's happening, although you should be able to see now Jeff and the tub and the hose. Now, Jeff's the driver on this trip, but do you guys take turns on who's washing off the roots?
I'm the raider, and that's another thing. We've got one raider doing all this. You know, that 0 to 3 scale was introduced by Iowa State in 2005. It used to be a 1 to 6, and prior to that it was 1 to 9. A lot of subjectivity. This 0 to 3 will allow raiders to calibrate to each other, and then they can go on their separate way. But ideally, you've got one raider doing all of them. Okay, so it takes out some error in the data, you know.
So as he's washing off these roots, how thorough does he have to be?
He has to completely remove all the dirt, because I'm going to go down into nodes, basically nodes 3, 4, 5, and 6, and by this time, those earlier nodes, like 3, 4, are deep in a lot of other roots, and you got to get all the dirt off. We just say you got to make them pearly white.
Now you said there was not really much rootworm pressure in this field here in northeast Iowa, but in the fields where you did see heavy pressure, what kind of difference would we be seeing in the healthy roots and the unhealthy?
Yeah, so if it's moderate pressure, you know, the corn plant can compensate by growing a lot of fibrous roots. So from looking at, you know, the root wad at arm's length, you won't see that much different. But under heavy pressure, it's very clear there is just no roots. The nodes are taken back all the way to the stalk. And again, we didn't have really, we had minimal, there were rootworm in here, but minimal pressure. So I went and dug a couple of lodged plants in part of the production field. And not the production field, he had a non-traded, no insecticide border on another trial, and I took those, and we're going to look at those after he washes them, because we won't see much here in terms of how you rate it. And I'll just do a high-level review of what we're looking for, and then we'll be done.
And again, the ratings were developed by Iowa State University,
Yeah.
you said, and you've kind of had to adapt a little bit to scale.
That's right. So, you know, when we got started on rating corn rootworms in the field, it was the 1 to 6 scale. But when that came out, that was such a great improvement. Everybody went to it. All the universities in the industry went to the 0 to 3.
Well, Jay, we're live, so we'll try not to trip over the microphone cord here as we work our way towards this camera so that our viewers can see what we're talking about.
Yeah. So, you know, this treatment is the untreated check, but essentially I can see a few feeding scars that, like this root here. So there is some rootworm in there. But what you rate are pruned nodal roots, okay? And what prune means, and that's a misnomer. When I think of pruning, I think of going out to my orchard and cutting branches. Really, what the rootworm larvae does, it will feed on the tip and destroy the growing point, so it stops growth. And a lot of adventitious roots will, you know, come out from that point. So we only call a root pruned if it's 1.5 inches or less from the stalk, okay? So if it was pruned out at 3 inches, you don't consider it. So it's the node injury scale, remember. And 0 to 3, so no nodes pruned. And again, we're looking at the untreated check in our trial. And I don't know if you can see it, but there are obviously, clearly, no nodes pruned. So what I did was, and if you can see look at the plant as a whole, this is good pressure. And we're in the same field. But again, we were the last to be planted in this entire field, and it probably missed the rootworm. And I think we can do better next year as we get both to be able to do more acres and get our approvals a little earlier. But you can see it's lodged. Again, that's what the grower looks for. He's not digging roots. You know, you can have this kind of damage and the soil's dry, it's cemented in. It's not going to lodge. As far as he's concerned, it's working, he or she, but if you dig it up, and they do some digging, especially when it's lodged, to see, hey, is it lodged because I don't have any roots, or was it just a strong wind? But in general, they don't. So if it's standing, it's performing. And so we're looking at, you know, basically the untreated check, but not in our field. There's no corn root management for that. So we're going to look at nodes. And you can notice that these higher nodes have shot roots out because it was laying on the ground. They started growing to get moisture. But this node here, you kind of look at what percent of that node is pruned. And again, you're looking at pruned roots. These are the growing tips, and they have been destroyed at that size. So it's not cut back. It's just stopped growing, and then they'll move on to another tip. Okay, they'll move on to another tip. Hopefully you can see that. So that's one node, so it gets a 1, okay? And then I go in, and that's probably node 7, could be 6, doesn't matter, but that's one node. And that was the first aerial nodal roots. You know, you see them above ground and they go down. And then you got node 5 or 6, and there are about half of those I would consider pruned. So now we're at 1.5, and so then I go into node 4. And then node 4, I don't see any pruned roots, so this would be a 1.5. And I would say, you know, if you're less than 0.75, so that's 0.75% of the roots across all the nodes are pruned. Okay, if you're less than that, you're at minimal risk of lodging. Okay, above that to about 1.75, you're at a moderate risk, and above a 2, you're at very high risk. It won't take much for that plant to lodge unless it's cemented into the ground. But you can see there's going to be a yield loss compared to something that hasn't been fed upon, okay, whether it's standing or not. So I hope that was not too confusing, clear as mud, but that's how we do it.
Well, and it has to be a thorough process.
Yes.
And we're not going to be talking about results with you, just how you did this, and then we'll be here shortly, I believe, talking with Allison from NewLeaf about what you found in this and other fields. So I think we'll get ready for a quick break here, and then we'll come back with Allison of NewLeaf Symbiotics. It's their virtual field day today in Northeast Iowa. Want to thank Jeff and Jay with Intent. Really appreciate that. And again, I think our viewers value that kind of information. I mean, that's what you get when you come to a field day, and we can't have the public out because of the pandemic. So
a little different.
the next best thing. Thanks so much, Jay.
Thanks, Mark.
This is Mark Dorenkamp live for Brownfield.